As you all know, Kiwi Farms is a website that likes to chronicle the online exploits
Yeah.
and also real-life exploits of people that they deem to be locals.
Yeah, those people who are sort of perpetual sources of amusement for the site for whatever reason.
And they have a very active forum dedicated to Elon Musk, and the content there it's pretty rough.
It can get pretty brutal.
It can get pretty brutal, and I think it's pretty fascinating because it does reveal some of the anxieties that are bubbling beneath the surface when it comes to our relationship to technology, the sort of cult of personality that's built up around Elon Musk, and I think some of the deeper anxieties about the direction that he's taking Twitter in.
Yeah, and some of his other companies too.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to be reading through some of these posts and just kind of riffing on them and seeing what we can learn about the mindset of this community and what it tells us about the broader societal anxieties that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, and how those anxieties are kind of reflected in this very specific online community.
Exactly.
I mean, we talk a lot about echo chambers on the internet, and this is certainly one of those.
Yeah, it's a very specific echo chamber.
But it can be a fascinating one to kind of peek into.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
So one of the things that comes up again and again on this Kiwi Farms forum is Elon Musk's stance on H-1B visas.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one.
And for those who aren't familiar with the H-1B visa program, it basically allows U.S. companies to hire foreign workers, particularly in tech fields.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that it's supposed to fill these skills gaps, where there aren't enough American workers with the specific skills that these companies need.
Right, but the Kiwi farmers are, they're not buying it.
No, they're very suspicious of the program.
Yeah, they view it as a direct threat to American jobs and wages.
Right, and they particularly focus on workers coming from India.
Yeah, it's a very specific focus.
Yeah, and they'll often use the term competency crisis.
Competency crisis, yeah.
Which is basically saying that, American tech workers are being pushed aside for cheaper labor.
Right, and that there's this kind of decline in the quality of work as a result.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a very contentious issue.
Absolutely.
And it's one that the Kiwi farmers are very vocal about.
Yeah, and they don't hold back in terms of the language that they use to express their opinions.
Oh, no, not at all.
It can get pretty inflammatory.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be getting into some of the more colorful language that's used on the forum.
Yes, that's part of the fun.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that, this is a very specific community with a very specific set of views, and it's not necessarily representative of the broader population.
No, of course not.
But it's still worth exploring because it gives us a window into a particular mindset and a particular way of thinking about these issues.
Exactly, and how these issues kind of intersect with broader societal anxieties.
Right. So let's dive into some of the specific criticisms that are leveled at Elon Musk on this forum.
Okay, sounds good.
So one of the most common criticisms is that he's a hypocrite.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
And they point to his stance on H-1B visas as a prime example.
Right, because on the one hand, he's this big proponent of bringing in foreign workers.
Right. He's all about, filling those skills gaps and making sure that his companies have access to the best talent.
Exactly. But on the other hand, he's also this sort of champion of American innovation and American exceptionalism.
Right. So the Kiwi farmers see this as a contradiction.
Yeah, they're basically saying, like, if you're so concerned about American jobs and American workers, then why are you supporting a program that's bringing in all these foreign workers?
And they'll often point to his own companies, Tesla and SpaceX as examples.
Right. They'll say, he's hiring all these foreign engineers and scientists while American workers are being laid off.
Yeah, so they see him as part of the problem.
Exactly.
And this is where that term Indo realist comes into play.
Right.
Which is a term that's used to describe users who are particularly critical of the influx of Indian workers through the H-1B program.
Yeah, and it's a term that's very specific to Kiwi farms.
Yeah, you won't really hear it anywhere else.
But it's a significant part of the discourse on that forum.
Yeah, and it reflects a deeper anxiety about the changing demographics of the tech industry.
Right, and the perceived impact that that's having on American society.
Yeah, and this is where things can get a little bit dicey.
Yeah.
Because some of the arguments that are made on the forum can veer into pretty problematic territory.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to be getting into some of those arguments in more detail later on, but for now, I think it's just important to acknowledge that this is a very sensitive topic, And it's one that's often discussed in a very inflammatory way on Kiwi farms.
Yeah, and we're not here to endorse any of those views.
No, absolutely.
We're just trying to present them in a neutral way so that we can understand the mindset of this community and the anxieties that are driving these conversations.
Exactly. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the specific posts that have been made about Elon Musk on this forum.
Okay, sounds good.
So one of the posts that we came across compares Elon Musk to a retarded boy seduced by a Zulu witch.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It's not exactly subtle.
No, not at all. And this is just one example of the kind of language that's used on this forum.
Yeah, it can get pretty intense.
Yeah. So just to be clear, we're not condoning this kind of language.
Of course not.
But we are trying to present it in a neutral way so that we can understand the context of these conversations.
Right, and the mindset of the people who are having them.
Exactly. So another post that we came across says that Elon Musk deliberately hopscotched into a pile of dog shit when he bought Twitter.
Okay, so they're not exactly fans of his management style.
No, not at all. They see him as this sort of reckless figure who's just making things worse.
Right, and they view the acquisition of Twitter as kind of the culmination of that recklessness.
Yeah, they're basically saying that he's in over his head.
Yeah, and that he's ruining the platform.
So those are just a couple of examples of the kind of criticisms that are leveled at Elon Musk on this forum.
Yeah, and we're going to be getting into more of them as we go along.
But I think it's important just to step back for a moment and just acknowledge that there's a lot of anger and resentment directed at Elon Musk on this forum.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's important to try to understand where that anger is coming from.
Yeah, because it's not just about, his policies or his management style.
Right. There's something deeper going on here.
Yeah, I think it's about a sense of betrayal.
Betrayal.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk is this figure who's supposed to represent the future.
Right. He's this visionary, this innovator.
Exactly, and I think a lot of people put their faith in him.
Yeah, they saw him as someone who was going to make the world a better place.
Right, and I think when he bought Twitter, there was this hope that he was going to, fix it.
Yeah, make it a better platform.
Make it a more open platform, a more free platform.
Right. But I think for a lot of people, that hope has been dashed.
Yeah, I think they feel like he's let them down.
And that's where the anger comes from.
I think so.
So it's a complex issue.
Very complex.
And it's one that we're going to be exploring in more depth as we continue our deep dive.
Yes, stay tuned.
All right, so let's move on to another major theme that comes up on this forum, which is the whole debate about H-1B visas and the competency crisis.
Right, yeah, that's a big one.
So we've already touched on this a little bit, but I think it's worth delving into in more detail. So as we mentioned, the H-1B visa program is a program that allows U.S. companies to hire foreign workers.
Right, and the idea is that it's supposed to fill skills gaps, where there aren't enough American workers with the specific skills that these companies need.
Right, but the Kiwi farmers are very skeptical of this program.
Yeah, they're not convinced that there really is a skills gap.
Right, they believe that there are plenty of qualified American workers who could fill these jobs.
Exactly, and they see the H-1B program as a way for companies to undercut American wages and hire cheaper foreign labor.
And they're particularly critical of the influx of Indian workers through this program.
Yeah, and they'll often use the term body shops to describe the companies that specialize in bringing in H-1B workers.
Right, and they'll accuse these companies of basically exploiting foreign workers and putting American workers out of a job.
And they'll also accuse the Indian workers themselves of being complicit in this system.
Right, they'll say that they're willing to work for lower wages and that they're driving down the quality of work.
Yeah, so it's a very contentious issue.
Absolutely, and it's one that's very emotionally charged.
Definitely.
And it's one that's often discussed in a very inflammatory way on Kiwi farms.
Yeah, and again, we're not here to endorse any of these views.
No, absolutely not.
We're just trying to present them in a neutral way so that we can understand the mindset of this community and the anxieties that are driving these conversations.
Exactly. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the specific arguments that are made on this forum about the H-1B program and the competency crisis.
Okay, sounds good.
So one of the arguments that you'll often hear is that the H-1B program is being abused by companies.
Right. They'll say that companies are using it to bring in workers who are not actually qualified.
Yeah, and they'll point to instances where, H-1B workers have been found to be incompetent or unqualified for the jobs that they're doing,
Right, and they'll say that this is proof that the system is broken.
and that is hurting American workers.
Exactly.
Another argument that you'll often hear is that the H-1B program is driving down wages.
Right, because if companies can hire foreign workers for lower wages, then they're less likely to pay American workers higher wages.
Exactly, and this is something that a lot of American tech workers are concerned about.
Yeah, they're worried that their jobs are being outsourced and that their wages are being undercut.
And this is where that term competency crisis comes into play.
Right, because the argument is that the influx of foreign workers is leading to a decline in the quality of work.
Yeah, and that this is ultimately hurting the American economy.
So it's a very complex issue.
It's very complex.
And it's one that's very emotionally charged.
Definitely, and it's one that's often discussed in a very inflammatory way on Kiwi farms.
Yeah. And again, we're not here to endorse any of these views.
No, absolutely.
We're just trying to present them in a neutral way so that we can understand the mindset of this community and the anxieties that are driving these conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there are legitimate concerns about the H-1B program.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, there are definitely instances where the program has been abused.
Right, and there are definitely cases where American workers have been displaced by foreign workers.
But I think it's also important to recognize that the H-1B program does serve a legitimate purpose.
Right, it does allow companies to fill skills gaps and to hire workers with specialized skills that they can't find in the U.S.
And I think it's important to have a nuanced discussion about this issue.
Definitely.
You know, one that acknowledges the legitimate concerns of American workers, but also recognizes the benefits of the H-1B program.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's often missing from the conversation on Kiwi farms.
Yeah, it's a very black and white view of the world.
Right, there's no middle ground.
And I think that's part of what makes it such a fascinating community to study.
Absolutely.
Because it gives us a window into a particular mindset and a particular way of thinking about these issues.
And it allows us to see how these issues are being framed and debated in a very specific online community.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, let's take a closer look at some of the specific posts that have been made about the H-1B program and the competency crisis on Kiwi farms.
Okay, that was good.
And this H-1B thing, you know, it gets even more intense when you look at this label that they use on Kiwi farms, the Indo realist.
Right, Indo realist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a term they use for people who are, how do we say this politely?
Yeah, it's a bit of a loaded term.
Yeah, they're not exactly embracing the whole multiculturalism thing.
Not really.
They're not super stoked about the influx of Indian workers specifically.
Right, they see it as a threat.
Yeah, and they're very vocal about
But
it.
to be fair to Kiwi farms, I mean, you see these kinds of sentiments popping up in other corners of the internet, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not like they invented this stuff.
It's just that on Kiwi farms, it's more concentrated, more out in the open.
No holds barred, right?
Exactly.
So what are these Indo realists so concerned about?
Well, basically, they see the H-1B program as this, like, Trojan horse. You know,
Okay.
a way for corporations to sneak in and undermine American wages and exploit foreign labor.
Right, cheaper labor.
Exactly. And for them, it's not just about the economics, you know, it's about preserving American culture and identity.
Okay.
They see globalization as this threat to their way of life.
So it's like a cultural anxiety thing?
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that.
Interesting.
And they see Elon Musk as part of the problem, you know, with his whole pro H-1B stance.
Right, like he's the enemy.
Pretty much.
Okay, so we're talking about economics, we're talking about culture. What else?
Well, there's also this whole thing about competency, you know?
Right, the competency crisis.
Exactly. They're basically saying that even if Indian workers were objectively more skilled,
Yeah.
you know, which is debatable,
Sure.
they still wouldn't want them here because of the cultural impact.
Okay, so it's not really about skills at all then.
Not really. No, it's about something deeper.
It's about identity.
Yeah, exactly. It's about who belongs here and who doesn't.
And they feel like Elon Musk is on the wrong side of that debate.
Definitely.
We found this one post by a user named Mary.
Oh, yeah, Mary.
Mary is very active on that forum. And this post kind of sums up the whole Indo-realist perspective.
Yeah, Mary doesn't hold back.
Not at all. And in this post, Mary's basically saying that Elon Musk is a hypocrite. You know,
Okay.
he talks about family values and all that, but then he has all these kids with different women, and it's like a whole mess.
Right. Very unconventional family life.
Yeah, and Mary's point is that if Musk can't even manage his own family, how can he be trusted to manage a company, let alone a whole platform like Twitter?
Yeah, it's an interesting argument.
It is interesting. It's like they're bringing his personal life into it.
Yeah, and whether that's fair or not is up for debate, but it definitely adds another layer to the whole discussion.
For sure. So we've got the H-1B debate, we've got the Indo realist angle, and now we've got this whole critique of Musk's personal life.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And we're not even done yet.
Because there's another big accusation that gets thrown around on Kiwi farms, and that's the idea that Musk is basically buying himself a fan base with Twitter.
Buying himself a fan base, huh?
Yeah, that's the theory anyway.
So, like, he's basically using Twitter to stroke his own ego.
Pretty much, they think he's more interested in getting likes and retweets than actually running a company.
So it's not about free speech or any of that.
No, they think that's all just a smokescreen.
It's all about him.
Exactly.
And Kiwi Farms is not having it.
No, they see right through it.
They're calling him out.
They're not afraid to say what everyone else is thinking.
And what's everyone else thinking?
That Elon Musk is a narcissist who's using Twitter to manipulate people.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
So what evidence do they have for this?
Well, they point to his constant tweeting about his companies.
Right, always promoting Tesla and SpaceX.
And they also point to his tendency to attack his critics on Twitter.
Yeah, he's definitely not shy about that.
And they say that this is all part of his strategy to control the narrative.
To make himself look good.
Exactly.
So it's all about image.
Pretty much.
And Kiwi Farms is saying that this is a dangerous trend.
Yeah, they're worried about the concentration of power in the hands of a few tech billionaires.
Right, like Elon Musk can basically say whatever he wants on Twitter, and there's no one to stop him.
And they're worried about the impact that this is having on our democracy.
So it's a pretty bleak picture they're painting.
Yeah. That's not very optimistic.
But I guess that's Kiwi Farms for you.
Can you say they're not exactly known for their sunny disposition?
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the first step is to just be aware of these issues.
To understand the concerns that people have about the power of tech billionaires.
Exactly.
And to be critical of the information that we're consuming online.
Don't just take everything at face value.
Do your own research.
Think for yourself.
And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Exactly, because if we don't start asking these questions, then who?
Well, that's a pretty good note to end on.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the twisted world of Kiwi Farms.
It's been a wild ride.
And be sure to check back next week for another episode.
We'll be exploring a whole new corner of the internet.
Until then, stay curious.
And stay skeptical.